Whether they're looking for rent to HMO or rent to service accommodation, the challenge is always there. In this video, I want to share with you 5 benefits as to why your letting agent will want to give you the deals. Hey, if you're watching my videos for the first time, my name is Saj Hussain, and on this channel I share with you my 15 plus years of property investing experience to ultimately help you get further faster in your own property investing business. When the market's really strong and buoyant as it is right now, demand is sky high for rental property, the rents are very high. Someone who's looking to rent can really struggle with why a letting agent's going to give them the property when they've got a queue of people waiting outside the door ready to snap up that property. A few days ago, we released a video on the YouTube channel for those looking to get started in property, and I was talking about rent to HMO and rent to service accommodation, and I got so many messages and private messages around trying to find those deals and really struggling to get the deals. And really, the key learning that I can share with you here, it's about putting yourselves in the shoes of the letting agent as to why would they let the property to you. And there are so many reasons why they should. In this video, I want to give you the 5 key ones. The first reason is you are multi-buyer. What does a multi-buyer even mean? Well, if we consider a regular tenant, someone that's going to be an individual or maybe a family that's renting from the landlord, they'll be renting that property from the agent to make it their home. What they're certainly not going to be doing is coming back for another one because they've already got their home unless they're looking to move. And each time an agent lists a property on the market, there's a number of things they need to do. They need to assess the property, they need to take photographs, they need to take measurements in terms of room sizes, they need to list it on the portals, they might have a floor plan they're doing, that's if they're not too lazy. And then they've got to write a description, they're going to be taking the calls for inquiries, assess those inquiries, book the viewings, do the viewings, find somebody suitable, process an application, and hopefully that's then the job done. Whereas when they choose to work with you, firstly, this whole process that they need to go through, they only need to do it once because they'll vet you once, they'll make the decision they want to work with you. And as long as you can prove yourself that you're going to deliver time and time again, the next time they get a property, you're going to come back again to take on another property from them. Hence multi-buyer. You're not going to be just taking one property from them, you'll be back several times. Ultimately, what that means for them is they save time and money. They don't need to take new photographs, relist the property, take those measurements. They don't need to go through all that rigmarole because they just need to contact you and say, hey, this is what we've got available. Do you want to have a look at it? And believe me, when I tell you that becomes easier and easier because as that relationship develops, that agent finds it so easy, they're just constantly throwing deals at you. Probably to a point you can't even take them all on, and you may even consider sourcing some of those deals off to other people. The second reason is that the letting agent is going to make more money from you than a regular tenant. Back in 2019, the government introduced the tenant fees ban, and ultimately what that meant was that tenants are no longer paying fees for the majority of things that they would have paid for previously. Now, for most letting agents, that was quite a hit. In fact, one of our agencies alone, we probably lost about £60,000 a year, fees that we would have earned from new tenancies. Now, we still need to do the same amount of work on those tenancies as we used to do pre-2019. However, now what's happening is that the landlord's paying more of that cost than the tenant ordinarily would have. However, none of this applies when we've got a commercial arrangement in place and where you're not signing up to a standard AST or an assured short-hold tenancy agreement. That's when somebody's occupying the property as their home. You will not be occupying it as your home, so these rules don't apply to you. Now, that's great news for the agent because they can charge you. But you might be thinking, hey, that means I've now got to pay. Absolutely, and the reason that's good news is because now they're incentivized to give you the deal versus somebody else where they're not going to earn a fee out of. So let's say a family move into that property, they're not going to be earning any tenant fees out of that. Whereas if you take on the property, they might charge you say £500 of fees that they're going to have to process the application and set up the agreements for you. Now, the reality is, yes, that's a cost to you. However, you should be earning more than that within your first month of getting up and running. Now the agent likes working with you because they're earning a fee from you where they wouldn't ordinarily. And let's say over the course of a year, they introduce 10 properties to you and you take those 10 properties on. So that's 500 times 10, that's £5,000 that they would not have earned if they let those properties to a regular family. Reason number 3 is they have to do less work and still get paid the same amount of money. So ordinarily, when a property is being let and it's managed as well, what that means is the agent is looking for a suitable tenant to come into that property, then they'll be managing the tenancy over that period of the lifetime of that tenancy. So for instance, they'll be collecting the rent, they'll be doing inspections on the property, dealing with any maintenance or repairs that need to be dealt with, and if there's any arrears that need to be dealt with as well, they'll be taking care of and looking after all those things. Now, when they choose to work with you, their workload is going to reduce. That's because you're going to be paying your rent on time. There's going to be very little maintenance, repairs work that you're going to speak to the landlord about, because most of the minor things you're going to deal with yourself. From an inspection point of view, when they do their inspections, again, the property is going to be in very good order because you'll be looking after it. You'll be there regularly with your cleaners to ensure that the property is in good order. Now, depending on the arrangement and the contractual agreement that you set up with the letting agent, it may be that you're dealing with the certificates, it may be you're dealing with repairs up to a certain level, but either way, essentially what it means is that the agent is probably going to be doing a lot less work than they would do in a normal tenancy, yet they're still getting paid the same amount of money. So you're making their life much easier. And if the agent is doing a tenant find only, that means they're only going to be finding the tenant and then connecting them with the landlord and no longer be involved with the ongoing management, then you revert back to reason number 2, because they can still charge you a fee where they're not going to be able to charge a fee to a family coming in. So still a win-win. Reason number 4 is the agent can offer a better service to their landlord by ensuring that there's no voids on the property. Ordinarily, when a family, for example, move into a house, they might be there, say, a year and a half, which tends to be about the norm, for example, in our tenancies. But at the point when the tenant moves out, it might be the property might need a little bit of work doing to refresh it, but also often there's a delay whilst one tenant moves out and the property is then prepared and remarketed to find a new tenant to move into the property. That might be a few weeks, it could even be a month, and that month is a loss to the landlord. That means they're not earning any money during that time. When you're taking the property on, say, for 3 or 5 years or even longer, what that means is there'll be no break in the income that the landlord's going to get. And effectively, it's a better proposition that the agent can put to the landlord by saying to the landlord, we have somebody here that's prepared to take the property on for a much longer period of time, meaning you're not going to get any of those voids during that time. Over the many years that we've been doing this, what we've also found is when we return those properties back to the landlords, that they're probably in better condition than when we took them on in the first place. So it means that the landlord actually has to do less work to remarket those properties and find somebody else that might be willing to take them on. Often is the case that the landlord's quite happy with the arrangement, it's worked really well for them, they probably just want an increase in the rent. And if that's something fair that we can absorb and make work for us, then that's something we'll certainly do. But there are occasions when we can't and we have to hand it back. In fact, if you want to learn more about a deal like that we did, I'll link up a video up here for you where we had to hand the property back even though it worked really well for us, it's making good money for us, because the landlord now wanted a much higher rent. And even in that example, the landlord got the property back in much better condition than when we had initially taken it on. What all of this means is when the letting agent is speaking to the landlord about your proposition, that there won't be any void during the period of your agreement, and also it's very likely that property in better condition when they hand it back because you'll be looking after it. With our HMOs, including the rent to rents, we have cleaners in there on a weekly basis, keeping an eye on the property, make sure they're in good order, they're kept clean and tidy, and notifying us of any maintenance or repairs that might need to be done. And in the service accommodation units that we have, whether they're ones we own or on a rent to rent basis, we find that the cleaners are in there much more frequently, several times a week sometimes, and again it means that properties are kept in very good order. Ultimately, what this means is when your letting agent is speaking to the landlord about your proposition, you are in a much stronger position. You're proposing something that's going to have minimal, if no voids, say for 3 or maybe 5 years. The property is going to be cleaned literally every week, if not even more frequently than that, but also maintained, and when handed back, probably in a better condition. All in all, making it a strong and compelling proposition. The 5th and final reason is that your proposition to the landlord will mean that they will have lower risk and better security. So how does that work? Well, most landlords, they want a tenant that's going to stay in the property, look after it, pay the rent on time, and when they leave, not have left any damage, but also if there's a problem that they can remove that tenant and be able to replace them quite quickly with another tenant. However, the reality is that landlords' rights are slowly being eroded away, and we've done many videos about this, to the point where some landlords feel quite vulnerable when they have a tenant in the property. However, with your proposition as a commercial arrangement, the landlord is still in a much more stronger position, because essentially, for example, if you stop paying rent, it's much easier to evict you from the property than it would be to evict somebody who actually lives in it as their home, because it could take months to get through court and get that tenant out. In fact, if you want to see an example of a video where we had to evict a tenant, which was very costly for us, there's a link up here for you to watch that afterwards. So it can be a painful process, but this means it's much easier for them, so it gives them more security, the risk is lower for them. So if you default on your rent, they can get the property back much quicker. They can also build clauses into the agreement that might be really important for them. So for example, if you're neglecting repairs that you've had a responsibility for, there's a lot of noise and parties late in the evening. In a normal tenancy, these can be quite difficult to enforce, whereas in this arrangement, it'll be much easier for the landlord to get you out of the property and giving them much more security. There are lots of rent-to-rent opportunities out there in the market. The thing is, you need to get out there and find them. Many people stumble at the first hurdle, as you're saying, just at the letting agent's door, not knowing what to say. I've just given you 5 compelling reasons why the agent should be working with you rather than, for example, letting to a family. What you now need to do is make sure you're getting out there, utilizing this information. Pop in the comment section below how you get on with that. I'd love to know, and I'll do my best to read all those comments and respond to all of them as well. And if you have enjoyed this video, then make sure you click on my face over here to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Then click on this video over here, which breaks down the different types of contracts that you need in a rent-to-rent arrangement.